Hello everyone, it is Jazz here. It is time for the book Excerpt reading. After a really close voting period between A Wrinkle in Time and Little Women, it turned out that an Instagram vote broke the tie and it ended up being A Wrinkle in Time that I'm going to read an excerpt from. Because quite a few of you said that you had never read this book before, I thought I would kind of set the scene of the excerpt that I'm going to read. This story centers around a teenage girl named Meg Murray. Her father, who is a scientist, has gone missing, and so her younger brother, who is 5, Charles Wallace, along with a new friend that they've made, Calvin, and also some mysterious women named Mrs. Whatsit, Mrs. Who, and Mrs. Witch are on a journey to basically find Meg's father. And in this scene, all 6 of them have stopped at this planet to kind of rest because they have literally wrinkled through time using something called a tesseract. Let's go on with the show. Well, Charles Wallace's voice said, "That was quite a trip. I do think you might have warned us." Light began to pulse and quiver. Meg blinked and shoved shakily at her glasses, and there was Charles Wallace standing indignantly in front of her, his hands on his hips. "Meg, Calvin, where are you?" She saw Charles. She heard him, but she could not go to him. She could not shove through the strange trembling light to meet him. Calvin's voice came as though it were pushing through a cloud. "Well, just give me time, will you? I'm older than you are." Meg gasped. It wasn't that Calvin wasn't there and then that he was. It wasn't that part of him came first and then the rest of him followed. Like a hand and then an arm and an eye and then a nose. It was a sort of shimmering, a looking at Calvin through water, through smoke, through fire, and then there he was, solid and reassuring. "Meg, Calvin, where's Meg?" "I'm right here," she tried to say, but her voice seemed to be caught at its source. "Meg, Mrs. Witch, you haven't left Meg behind, have you? If you've hurt Meg, any of you." Calvin started, but suddenly Meg felt a violent push and a shattering, as though she had been thrust through a wall of glass. "Oh, there you are," Charles Wallace said, and rushed over and hugged her. "But where am I?" She looked around rather wildly. They were standing in a sunlit field, and the air about them was moving with the delicious fragrance that comes only with the rarest of spring days, when the sun's touch is gentle and the apple blossoms are just beginning to unfold. She pushed her glasses up on her nose to reassure herself that what she was seeing was real. They had left the silver glint of a biting autumn evening, and now around them everything was golden with light. The grasses of the field were a tender new green, and scattered about were tiny multicolored flowers. Meg turned slowly to face a mountain reaching so high into the sky that its peak was lost in a crown of puffy white clouds. From the trees at the base of the mountain came a sudden singing of birds. There was an air of such ineffable peace and joy all around her that her heart's wild thumping slowed. "When shall we 3 meet again in thunder, lightning, or in rain?" came Mrs. Who's voice. Suddenly the 3 of them were there. Mrs. Whatsit with her pink stole askew, Mrs. Who with her spectacles gleaming, and Mrs. Witch still little more than a shimmer. Delicate multicolored butterflies fluttered about them as though in greeting. Mrs. Whatsit and Mrs. Who began to giggle, and they giggled until it seemed that whatever their private joke was, they would fall down with the wild fun of it. The shimmer seemed to be laughing too. It became vaguely darker and more solid, and then there appeared a figure in a black robe and a black peaked hat, beady eyes, a beaked nose, and long gray hair. One bony claw clutched at a broomstick. "Well, just to keep you girls happy," the strange voice said, and Mrs. Whatsit and Mrs. Who fell into each other's arms in gales of laughter. If you ladies have had your fun, I think you ought to tell Calvin and Meg a little bit more about all this. You scared Meg half out of her wits, whisking her off this way without any warning. Vincerant animae rola et pielpuca loquentis, Horace, to action little, less to words inclined. Mrs. Who, I wish you'd stop quoting. But she finds it so difficult to verbalize, Charles dear. It helps her if she can quote instead of working out words on her own. And we mustn't lose our senses of humor. The only way to cope with something deadly serious is to treat it a little lightly. But it's going to be hard for Meg. It's going to be hard for her to realize that we are serious. What about me? The life of your father isn't at stake. What about Charles Wallace then? Charles Wallace knows. Charles Wallace knows that it's far more than just the life of his father. Charles Wallace knows what's at stake. But remember, e pu uvan pandeve episio chaot. Euripides, nothing is hopeless. We must hope for everything. Where are we now and how did we get here? Uriel, the third planet of the star Malik in the spiral nebula of Messer 101. This I'm supposed to believe. You lie. For some reason, Meg felt that Mrs. Witch, despite her looks and ephemeral broomstick, was someone in whom one could put complete trust. It doesn't seem any more peculiar than anything else that's happened. Well, then someone just tell me how we got here. Even traveling at the speed of light would take us years and years to get here. Oh, we don't travel at the speed of anything. We tesser, or you could say we wrinkle. Clear as mud. Tesser, Meg thought. Could that have anything to do with Mother's tesseract? She was about to ask when Mrs. Witch started to speak, and one did not interrupt when Mrs. Witch was speaking. Mrs. Whatsit is young and naive. She keeps thinking she can explain things with words. Qui plus c'est, plus c'était. French, you know. The more a man knows, the less he talks. But she has to use words for Meg and Calvin. If you brought them along, they ought to know what's going on. Meg went up to Mrs. Witch. In the intensity of her question, she had forgotten all about the tesseract. Is my father here? Not here, Meglet. Mrs. Whatsit, explain. She is young, and the language of words is easier for her than it is for Mrs. Who and me. We stopped here more or less to catch our breaths and to give you a chance to know what you're up against. But what about Father? Is he all right? For the moment, love, yes. He's one of the reasons we're here. But you see, he's only one. Well, where is he? Please take me to him. We can't. Not yet. You have to be patient, Meg. But I'm not patient. I've never been patient. If you want to help your father, then you must learn patience. Vitam impendia viro, to stake one's life for the truth. That is what we must do. That's what your father is doing. Now, why don't you children wander around and Charles can explain things a little. You're perfectly safe on Uriel. That's why we stopped here to rest. That was my reading of A Wrinkle in Time. I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. I know a lot of you said that you like this particular edition of this bind up of the Wrinkle in Time series. So I have gone ahead and linked the exact copy of this that I got in my affiliate links in the description. That is all for today. Thank you guys for watching. Bye. This is gonna be the outtake moment. Our wits whisking us off the way. So many W's. Panda bear. It's like pandas. Okay. In the spiral nebula of Messer 101. This is what people on Doctor Who feel like. Yeah. Or Kiot. Kiot. No. To cope with something deadly serious. so many S's.
Yeah.
Mrs. Watson would never say you guys, okay? Suddenly she's a New Yorker. But remember, e pu uvan pandave episio teot. Euripides, nothing is hopeless. We must hope for everything. Okay, I got it.
Yes.
Praise Jesus. Thank you. Thank you. No.
Yeah, that's great.